So by the year 2050, projections are indicating that a staggering 10 million people every single year will die. And not from heart disease, or cancer, but just from common everyday infection.
Right, just basic everyday things.
Exactly, like a scraped knee, a routine dental procedure, or even just a mild respiratory bug. These are going to become potential death sentences for you.
It's completely terrifying, honestly.
It really is. And the most unsettling part of this data isn't even the biological mutation of the bacteria itself, it's the underlying cause.
Yeah, the human element of it all.
Right, because according to the research we're jumping into today, this impending global catastrophe is basically being driven by our own psychological fear. Like our collective panic about getting sick is literally mutating bacteria into these unkillable superbugs.
It's a profound and, well, a pretty terrifying feedback loop. I mean, we're looking at a scenario where human emotion...
Specifically the fear of illness, right?
Yeah, exactly. The fear of illness and this desperate craving for external validation is biologically engineering a mass extinction event. We're so afraid of disease that our reaction to it is stripping away our only biological defenses.
That is the startling reality we are plunging into for this deep dive. And to truly understand the mechanics of how human psychology is altering global biology, we're merging two stacks of sources today that, well, at first glance, they might seem like they belong in completely different universes.
Yeah, they really do seem miles apart at first.
For sure. On one side of the desk, we have this dense, highly philosophical transcript exploring the principles of quantum mechanics, specifically the observer effect and how human consciousness dictates physical reality.
Right, the physics side of things.
Yep. And then on the other side, we have this massive, very pragmatic dossier of medical policy documents, public health data, and business plans.
And that medical dossier, it's entirely centered around the life's work of Dr. Cadielli-Srivatsa.
Who is a fascinating figure in all this.
He really is.
Yeah.
He's a physician who has spent over 40 years on the front lines of medicine. And he's developed this revolutionary artificial intelligence called Dr. Maya, along with its physical deployment network, which is called the Prima Kiosk.
So our mission today is to bridge the gap between these two realms. We're going to explore how our current incredibly centralized, doctor-centric healthcare system has basically trapped humanity in a vicious cycle of silent suffering.
A system that really conditions people to surrender their autonomy.
Absolutely. But more importantly, we are going to look at the way out. We'll examine how decentralizing healthcare...
By taking the power out of the hospital.
Exactly. Taking the power of diagnosis out of the hospital and putting it directly onto the street corner through intelligent, patient-centric technology, and how that can actually help humanity reclaim its free will and trust its own inner wisdom again.
It's all about recognizing that we are currently participating in a system built on a foundation of panic. And, well, the only way to stop this impending biological crisis is to introduce a completely objective, emotionless filter.
A filter that trains us to observe our reality without all that panic.
Precisely.
But, before we get to the artificial intelligence and the medical kiosks, we really have to start at the very foundation of how we perceive reality itself.
Yeah, we have to lay the groundwork.
Right, because if we're going to talk about how fear creates disease, we need to understand the physics of observation. The source materials spend a lot of time on quantum mechanics, specifically the double slit experiment.
Oh, yeah, the classic double slit.
Well, yeah. And for someone who, hasn't sat in a physics classroom in a decade, can you explain the mechanics of what actually happens in that experiment?
I can certainly try, because it is arguably the most disruptive scientific experiment of the last century. To understand it, you kind of have to throw out your everyday assumption that the universe is just this collection of solid, permanent objects.
Okay, throw out everything I know. Got it.
Basically, yeah. Because in the classical Newtonian view of the world, a table is a table whether you're looking at it or not.
Right, it's just physically there.
But quantum mechanics suggests that at the most fundamental subatomic level, the universe doesn't operate like that at all.
So what did the scientists actually do in this experiment?
Well, they set up a barrier with two tiny vertical slits in it. And behind that barrier, they placed a screen designed to record the impact of whatever hit it. Then they began firing single subatomic particles.
Like electrons.
Like electrons or photons, exactly.
Yeah.
They fired them at the barrier. Now, logic dictates that if you're firing solid, tiny projectiles, they should travel in a straight line.
Right. Pass through the slits, form two lines.
Right, like firing marbles through a gap in a fence. They should form two distinct parallel lines on the back screen.
That makes total intuitive sense. You fire a marble, it goes through the gap, it hits the wall behind it.
But that is not what the recording screen showed.
What did it show?
When the scientists were not actively measuring or, observing which specific slit the individual particle traveled through, the screen showed a massive, complex interference pattern.
An interference pattern, like what you see with water.
Yes, exactly. It looked like a series of many alternating light and dark bands. And that pattern is significant because it's what happens when waves interact, not solid objects.
Right.
Imagine dropping two pebbles into a still pond at the exact same time. The ripples spread out, and where the crests of the waves meet, they amplify into a bigger wave.
And where they clash, they cancel out.
Exactly. Where a crest meets a trough, they cancel each other out. That creates an interference pattern. So the fact that single electrons were creating this pattern meant that each individual particle was somehow behaving like a fluid wave.
Wait, really? Like it was a wave?
Yes. It was passing through both slits simultaneously, interfering with itself, and hitting the back screen in multiple places at once.
Okay, my brain is already starting to hurt a little. How can a single solid particle go through two doors at the exact same time?
In quantum mechanics, it's called a state of superposition. Until the particle is measured, it doesn't actually possess a fixed physical location.
It's just nowhere.
It's everywhere. It exists as a wave of pure probability. It represents an infinite spectrum of potential outcomes, just hovering in an invisible quantum field.
Oh.
It is literally everywhere it could possibly be all at once in a state of boundless potential.
An ocean of infinite probabilities, as the source text calls it. But here is where the absolute core of the mystery lies for me. What happened when the scientists decided they wanted to see exactly which slit the electron was going through?
That's the turning point. They placed a measurement device, basically a little detector, right next to the slits to observe the particle's path.
To catch it in the act, basically.
Right. But the very millisecond that measurement device was turned on, the entire nature of the experiment shifted. The fluid wave of infinite probability instantaneously collapsed.
I just vanished.
The electrons stopped behaving like waves entirely. They immediately started behaving like solid marbles again. They passed through one slit or the other, and they formed just two distinct lines on the back screen.
Oh, wow. So the mere act of looking at the particle fundamentally altered its physical structure.
Precisely. The act of conscious measurement, the act of focused attention, it forced the universe to stop hovering in a state of infinite potential and crystallize into one specific solid reality.
That's wild.
It really is. This is the observer effect. It implies that physical reality is not just this passive landscape sitting there waiting for us to wander through it. It implies that consciousness itself is the active mechanism that pulls physical matter out of the void and locks it into place.
That is a staggering concept.
Yeah.
It suggests that the observer and the observed aren't separate entities at all, but are completely entangled.
Completely intertwined, yeah.
So how do the source materials translate this abstract subatomic physics up to the macro level, like human psychology and the reality we live in every day?
Well, the texts take this principle and they apply it to human emotional coherence. If the act of focused attention is the spark that collapses the quantum wave into a physical outcome, then the quality of your attention matters immensely.
Right, because what you focus on becomes real.
Exactly. The universe, according to this framework, is just an objective, energetic mirror. It doesn't judge whether your thoughts are morally good or bad. It simply responds to the frequency of your focus.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So at this exact second, an uncountable number of parallel versions of your future are coexisting in that state of probability.
But the dossier points out a very grim reality about how most people are utilizing this mechanism. I mean, we aren't collapsing waves of joy and health and abundance. The texts observe that the vast majority of humanity is silently suffering.
Yeah, that's the tragedy of it.
People are living in a chronic, suffocating state of fear.
Yes, and the texts are very specific about the nature of this fear. It is a multifaceted terror. People live in fear of failure, fear of poverty, fear of legal repercussions, fear instilled by rigid religious dogma, and
most crucially for our discussion, a profound fear of health issues.
exactly, the fear of getting sick.
And according to the quantum framework, what happens when your dominant emotional state, your primary lens of observation, is just pure fear?
You manifest the exact conditions you are terrified of by persistently fixating on what is broken, what is lacking, or what might attack you. You're acting as a negative observer.
You're calling it into existence.
You are. You're investing your vital energetic currency into worst-case scenarios. if you view your body and the world through a lens of absolute suspicion and panic.
Like always assuming the worst.
Right. If you constantly assume that you are fragile and that disease is inevitable, the quantum field obediently orchestrates the biological and environmental scenarios that flawlessly validate that cynical hypothesis.
So you collapse a wave of suffering into physical reality.
You do. You create your own torture.
The sources mention that this directly defies the law of the universe, right? This spiritual concept that we're not actually born to suffer or experience pain, but the artificial conditions and beliefs we cling to make our lives torturous.
Exactly. The natural state of biological life is homeostasis. It's balance, health, and equilibrium. Suffering is largely a byproduct of resistance to that natural state, which is often driven by this fear-based observation.
Okay, I need to step in here and play devil's advocate for a second because I can hear the listener's skepticism alarms ringing right now.
Fair enough. Go ahead.
When we talk about manifesting reality and how our thoughts dictate our physical circumstances, it can very quickly veer into the territory of toxic positivity.
Right. The just think happy thoughts trap.
Exactly. It sounds like a new age philosophy that blames sick people for their own illnesses. I mean, if I'm in a horrific car accident and I have a compound fracture, like my femur is literally snapped in half.
You can't just positive think your way out of that.
Right. I cannot just close my eyes, visualize a healthy leg, and observe the bone back together. I can't just ignore a malignant tumor by refusing to focus on it. So how does this quantum theory practically apply to the hard reality of human biology without crossing the line into sheer delusion?
That is the most important pushback you could offer. And it's a vital distinction to make, honestly. The sources are absolutely not advocating for delusion.
Okay, good.
Nor are they suggesting that you can magically wish away a traumatic physical injury. If your leg is broken, the wave function has already collapsed into that specific, painful reality. The bone is broken.
You have to go to a hospital.
You must go to a doctor and have it mechanically set. The physical rules of the macro universe still apply.
So where does the observer effect actually come into play when it comes to our health then?
It comes into play in the systemic reality we have collectively built, and how our psychological reaction to minor symptoms dictates our biological future.
Ah, our reaction. Okay.
The observer effect in this context is not about magically healing a broken bone. It's about how our collective, panic-driven fear of illness drives our behavioral choices, and how those choices exert real, measurable evolutionary pressure on the biological world around us.
So it's the bridge between internal psychology and external biology. I want to make sure I'm grasping this. Are you saying that our internal fear makes us take actions in the physical world that actually create the diseases we're so afraid of?
That is exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And we don't even have to look at abstract physics to prove it. The physical manifestation of our collective fear is already here.
It's already happening.
It is measurable, it is lethal, and it is threatening the entire globe right now.
Yeah.
Which brings us directly to the medical data in the dossier, specifically regarding the nightmare of antimicrobial resistance, or AMR.
Right, the post-antibiotic era. Let's look at the hard data, because this is where the quantum theory becomes a terrifying physical reality. The dossier references the Graham Project, the global research on antimicrobial resistance, along with data from the World Health Organization. What exactly are we facing here?
Well, the numbers are catastrophic. AMR occurs when bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites change over time, and they no longer respond to medicine.
They just adapt.
Yeah, they adapt. This makes infections much harder to treat and increases the risk of disease spread, severe illness, and death. Currently, the data shows that AMR is directly responsible for over 1 million deaths globally each year.
1 million deaths already.
But the trajectory is what is truly terrifying.
Right, the 2050 projection we talk about.
By the year 2050, it is projected that AMR will kill 10 million people annually.
Wow.
To put that massive number into perspective, that will surpass the global death toll of all forms of cancer combined.
Oh, wow. That is just, it's hard to even wrap your head around.
It is. And economically, we're talking about a cumulative toll projected to reach $100 trillion. Global average life expectancy is expected to fall by nearly 2 years. The sources make it unequivocally clear. The post-antibiotic era is not some hypothetical science fiction threat lurking in the distant future.
It's not a movie plot, it's a present reality.
Exactly.
So how exactly does our psychological fear, our role as the negative quantum observer, how does that mechanically drive this biological mutation?
It is the fatal flaw of what the texts call the doctor-centric healthcare model.
Okay, unpack that for us.
To understand the mechanism, Consider a very common scenario. An average person wakes up and feels a mild physical symptom. Perhaps it's scratchy throat, a slight fever, or a temporary stomach upset.
Right. And in a state of emotional equilibrium, you might recognize that as a minor inconvenience. You just rest, drink some water, and let your immune system handle it.
Exactly. But we don't live in a state of emotional equilibrium.
No, we really don't.
We live in a society deeply conditioned by fear. So the patient's ego immediately panics. They view that minor symptom through the lens of catastrophe.
Oh, yeah, the classic WebMD spiral.
Right. They perform a quick internet search, read the absolute worst-case scenarios, and suddenly, a standard viral cold transforms into a life-threatening medical emergency in their mind.
So they collapse the wave of a minor illness into a wave of sheer terror.
Exactly. And because they're terrified, they don't trust their own body. They don't trust their inner wisdom, which the universe's laws suggest they possess.
They need an authority figure.
Yes. Instead, they demand immediate, authoritative, external validation. They surrender their autonomy and rush to a centralized medical institution, like a doctor's office or an emergency room.
And they don't just want reassurance, right? They want a tangible intervention. They want a pill to basically soothe their psychological anxiety.
Yes, they demand antibiotics. Now, medically speaking, antibiotics do absolutely nothing to fight a viral infection like the common cold or the flu.
They only kill bacteria.
Right. But the physician is placed in an incredibly difficult position. They're pressured by time, constrained by institutional protocols, fearful of malpractice lawsuits.
And they're sitting across from a panicked, insistent patient who refuses to leave without a prescription.
Exactly. So the doctor yields. They write the prescription for the antibiotic.
And this is where the biology mutates.
This is the mechanism. When you flood the human body and the environment with unnecessary antibiotics, you act as an extreme evolutionary pressure cooker.
Because it wipes out the good stuff, too.
Right. The drugs wipe out all the friendly, susceptible bacteria in your microbiome. But bacteria are ancient, highly adaptable organisms. A tiny fraction of them possess genetic mutations that allow them to survive the drug.
They basically have a biological shield.
Yes. And with all the competition wiped out, those surviving resistant bacteria, the superbugs, they multiply rapidly.
Oh, man.
Furthermore, they can actually swap genetic material, passing these resistance traits to completely different types of bacteria through pieces of DNA called plasmids.
Wait, really? They teach other bacteria how to resist?
Basically, yeah. So by demanding drugs, we do not need to soothe the fear that is not real. We are orchestrating the mass extinction of our own biological defenses and breeding unkillable pathogens.
It's an incredible chain of causality. Psychological fear directly leads to the biological mutation of a superbug.
It does.
But the dossier gets even darker when it talks about where this fear drives us to congregate. The sources refer to modern hospitals as superbug amplification zones.
Yeah, this might be the most chilling reality detailed in the public health data. We are culturally conditioned to view hospitals as absolute sanctuaries of healing.
Right, it's where you go to get better.
But biologically, because of this immense density of antibiotic use in sick patients, they have transformed into concentrated reservoirs for multi-drug-resistant organisms.
The numbers in the dossier are alarming on this. It notes that in some critical regions, up to 83% of individuals inside a hospital environment are colonized with these highly resistant pathogens.
83%. So just map out the logistics of this fear-based system for a second. Driven by panic, highly contagious individuals leave their homes and travel to a centralized clinic or hospital.
They become highly efficient vectors for disease.
They do. They shed untreatable pathogens onto the chairs in the waiting room, the magazines on the table, the door handles of the restroom.
They infect the people around them before they ever even get called back to see a doctor.
Precisely. They expose highly vulnerable populations, the elderly, the immunocompromised, infants straight to superbugs. The sheer density of terrified, sick people amplifies each other's infections before any actual medical treatment even begins.
The analogy that comes to mind is absolute madness. Imagine we are all trapped in a burning building, right? The fire represents our collective fear of illness.
Okay, yeah.
But the fire extinguisher we keep blindly reaching for, the antibiotics, is actually filled with gasoline. We are spraying it everywhere, thinking we're putting out the fire, but we're making the inferno exponentially worse.
That's a great way to picture it.
And the safe zone we all instinctively run to for shelter, the hospital waiting room, is actually the very center of the inferno. It's where the fire is burning the hottest.
That analogy perfectly captures the systemic failure. We have built a system that fundamentally encourages absolute dependency. Patients are taught from the moment they're born to surrender their free will and their common sense to these centralized bureaucratic systems.
And the sources are highly critical of this historical trajectory, actually. They specifically mention the need to avoid the path created by industrial titans like Rockefeller and his associates in the early 20th century.
Yes, the reference to Rockefeller highlights this shift toward an industrial, heavily institutionalized medical complex.
It wasn't always this way.
No, it wasn't. This was an era that standardized medical education, sure, but it also heavily prioritized pharmaceutical interventions, drugs that could be patented, manufactured, and sold. It prioritized that over holistic or preventative care.
It established a paradigm that required people to blindly trust and believe in monolithic systems.
Systems that, according to the philosophical text, ultimately lead to surrender, systemic enslavement, and prolonged suffering.
Right, it's an enslavement through crushing medical debt, massive bureaucratic delays, and now infections that completely evade modern medicine. We are locked in this cycle where our fear feeds the system, and the system feeds our fear.
If we pull back and look at this through the lens of the observer effect we discussed earlier, the doctor-centric model literally forces humanity to remain in the role of a helpless victim.
We're constantly observing ourselves as weak.
Right. It demands that we constantly observe our own bodies as fragile, broken machines that require institutional saving. As long as we hold that observation, we're going to continue to collapse a wave of disease, dependency, and biological mutation every single day.
That is a bleak picture.
Yeah.
I mean, if our psychological panic and our blind reliance on these centralized gasoline-filled fire extinguishers are actively creating this 10 million death AMR catastrophe, how on earth do we stop it?
It seems impossible, right?
Yeah. How do we change the collective observation?
To change the trajectory of our future, we actually have to look to the profound wisdom of the past. We need to completely dismantle the doctor-centric model and return to true patient-centric care.
Which brings us to the historical framework underlying Dr. Srivatsa's work. The dossier outlines Dr. Karyali Srivatsa's 40-year mission at the front lines of pediatric medicine. He is a physician, an innovator, and the architect of the Dr. Maya AI ecosystem. But his philosophy isn't just a modern technological disruption.
Not at all. It's deeply rooted in historical precedent.
Right. The sources explicitly connect his approach to two towering figures in medical history who saw what the establishment basically refused to acknowledge: Acharya Charaka and Florence Nightingale.
Let's start with Acharya Charaka. He was operating in ancient India over 2,000 years ago, and he's widely remembered as one of the principal contributors to Ayurveda, the ancient system of medicine.
What was Charaka's core philosophy regarding how a physician should interact with a patient?
Well, Charaka's sheer brilliance lay in the fact that he did not view illness as a mechanical, isolated event disconnected from the human being experiencing it.
Like you aren't just a broken arm.
Exactly. He recognized that a disease couldn't be understood in a vacuum. It had to be interpreted through a massive web of variables: the patient's unique constitution, their specific story, their environment, their daily habits, their diet.
He looked at the whole picture.
Yes, and the subtle patterns linking all of these elements together.
It was an entirely relational and observational approach rather than just a mechanical one.
Exactly. For Charaka, the role of the physician wasn't to quickly slap a standardized label onto a cluster of symptoms and hand out a generic remedy.
Right.
He understood that slapping a label on a patient, like telling them you have this specific disease, often generates immediate psychological fear, which only worsens the condition.
So the doctor's role wasn't to label, but to listen.
To listen deeply, to identify the root cause of the imbalance, and to offer a solution that restored the patient's natural harmony. He empowered the patient to understand their own body. This is the absolute foundation of what true patient-centered care was meant to be.
The dossier draws a very sharp, very critical contrast between Charaka's holistic method and the reality of modern Western healthcare. Modern medicine seems to have sprinted in the exact opposite direction.
It really has. Modern healthcare has become relentlessly institution-centered, protocol-centered, and billing-centered.
It's a machine.
It is. It prioritizes the efficiency of the assembly line over the understanding of the individual. Patients are funneled through rigid algorithmic pathways that prioritize rapid diagnosis, expensive physical investigations, and pharmaceutical treatments.
All before the physician ever truly hears the person's lived experience.
Exactly.
It rewards what can be easily measured in a spreadsheet, what can be coded for insurance billing, and what can be legally defended in court. it doesn't necessarily reward healing.
And the consequence of that modern system is a generation of massive, unnecessary fear. It leads to over-investigation, ordering countless scans and blood tests just to cover liability.
Which leads to massive financial disparities and bankruptcies.
Yes. The documents argue that true patient-centered care isn't just about handing a patient a glossy, polite leaflet about their disease, or like asking them to fill out a customer satisfaction survey on an iPad in the waiting room.
Right, that's just PR. True patient-centered care is building a system that actually comprehends what the patient is physically and emotionally experiencing without automatically generating panic.
It's recognizing that not all suffering requires a hospital visit.
Which perfectly transitions us to the second historical giant mentioned in the texts, Florence Nightingale.
Florence Nightingale, operating in the Victorian slums and the brutal military hospitals of the 19th century.
And she was working in an era long before modern antibiotics or complex medical machinery even existed.
She didn't have miracle drugs. She didn't have MRIs or any of that. What she had was an unparalleled capacity for systemic observation.
What did she actually do?
Nightingale proved, through meticulous data collection and observation, that the vast majority of preventable deaths were not simply the inevitable outcome of biology. People weren't just dying because they were sick. They were dying because of systemic environmental failure.
She looked at the filthy conditions, right? The lack of ventilation, the poor nutrition.
Yes. By observing those patterns, enforcing strict hygiene protocols, and enacting systemic environmental reforms, she saved countless lives. She changed the architecture of care.
So we have the holistic listening of Charaka and the systemic observation of Nightingale. But practically speaking, how does a modern listener apply this wisdom?
That's the challenge.
Right, because if the ultimate goal of this deep dive is for humanity to reclaim its free will, to start being enslaved by the fear of illness and crushing medical bills, how do we apply the philosophy of a 2,000-year-old Ayurvedic architect and a Victorian nurse in an era dominated by mutating superbugs and artificial intelligence?
The answer is remarkably elegant, and it ties directly back to solving the problem of the observer effect.
Okay, how so?
If human panic is the chaotic gasoline that keeps collapsing our reality into sickness, over-medication, and biological mutation, we need a tool to filter out that panic.
We need a mechanism that intercepts the fear before the patient ever reaches the hospital waiting room.
Exactly. We need an objective, emotionless lens that trains us to observe our symptoms accurately, based purely on biology, without the distortion of terror.
We need to replace the frantic, panicking ego with a calm, master observer.
Enter the artificial intelligence.
Let's break down Dr. Maya, the technological filter Dr. Srivatsa created, because this is fascinating.
It is crucial to start by defining exactly what Dr. Maya GPT is not. The medical documents are incredibly emphatic about establishing these boundaries.
What is it not?
Dr. Maya is not a diagnostic chatbot. It is not designed to replace human doctors, and it absolutely does not spit out a specific disease label for the user.
Right. Because as we learned from Charaka, handing someone a medical label often just triggers a new wave of fear. You say, you have X disease, now the patient is terrified of X.
Precisely. Instead of diagnosing, Dr. Maya is classified as an advanced decision support and triage tool. Its primary function is to prevent two extremely dangerous human tendencies: guessing out of panic and accepting false reassurance.
False reassurance is a massive problem. The dossier notes that relying on the well-meaning but ignorant advice of friends or going down the rabbit hole of internet symptom checkers is a major factor, making medical errors the third most common cause of death.
It really is. So how does Dr. Maya actually operate as this master observer? It is built upon 50 years of Dr. Srivatsa's clinical diagnostic experience, and it relies heavily on translating established clinical frameworks into AI algorithms.
What kind of frameworks?
Specifically, it utilizes logic derived from the Pediatrics Assessment Triangle, or PAT, combined with the CALM system, which stands for Clinical Assessment and Life Monitoring.
I want to pause and explain those acronyms because this is the mechanics of how the AI thinks. What exactly is the PAT?
The Pediatric Assessment Triangle is a rapid, highly structured observational tool used by emergency room doctors. It forces the physician to look at three very specific things before they even touch the patient:
Okay, what are they?
appearance, work of breathing, and circulation to the skin.
So, appearance meaning, are they alert or are they floppy and unresponsive? Work of breathing, are they breathing calmly or are they grunting and using their chest muscles to gasp for air?
Exactly.
And circulation, is their skin a normal color or is it pale, mottled, or blue?
Yes. It strips away the emotional noise and forces an objective assessment of physiological stability. Dr. Maya digitizes this exact kind of structured logic.
That makes a lot of sense.
When a patient interacts with the AI, they simply describe what they are feeling in their own everyday language. They don't need to use medical jargon, they just speak.
And the AI listens. It acts like Terica. But it's programmed not to listen to the loudest or most dramatic symptoms the panicked patient is shouting about. It's programmed to extract the meaningful ones.
Yes, it identifies what the system calls the symptom triad, the three most clinically significant indicators.
Let's use a highly specific example to ground this for you listening.
Good idea. Imagine a patient who is incredibly anxious. They log into the system and say, "My stomach is absolutely killing me. I'm exhausted all the time. My head is pounding, and I get super dizzy every single time I stand up. I Googled it, and I think I might have stomach cancer."
The patient's ego is screaming. They are observing a catastrophic, life-ending reality.
But Dr. Maya doesn't absorb the panic. It calmly filters the narrative, strips away the emotional anxiety, and extracts the biological triad.
Which, in this case, would be?
Abdominal pain, plus chronic fatigue, plus orthostatic dizziness.
It looks purely at the pattern.
Yes, and once it identifies that clinical pattern, it runs the data through a mathematically validated, heavily structured, color-coded triage system.
This is the absolute genius of the innovation, honestly.
It takes massive, incomprehensible medical complexity and simplifies it into a clear, actionable output of 4 distinct colors.
Let's break down this color code, because this is essentially the new operating system for how humanity should observe its health. Think of it like a financial credit score, but for your immediate biological risk. It instantly categorizes the danger.
Exactly. At the absolute highest level of urgency, we have the red code. Red means emergency. It indicates an immediate threat to life or limb.
What are the instructions for red?
They are unequivocal. Speak to a doctor immediately, call an ambulance, or go straight to the hospital. And the algorithmic rule is absolute. A red code always overrides any green or yellow indicators.
Okay, red is straightforward, but the next color is where the AI actively fights the superbug crisis. Blue. Blue acts as the biological firewall.
Yes, a blue code indicates a highly suspected infection risk. This means the symptom triad points toward a contagious pathogen.
Like influenza or something worse.
Perhaps a virulent strain of influenza, a novel virus, or a resistant bacterial infection.
If the AI outputs a blue code, the instructions are basically designed to protect the community, right?
The guidance is strict. Isolate at home immediately. Do not travel. Do not get on a bus. Do not go sit in a crowded doctor's waiting room.
You just stay put.
Right. The system will facilitate a remote telehealth consultation with a doctor. The blue code overrides all other colors, including red, green, and yellow, because containing a contagious outbreak and preventing it from entering the hospital is paramount to public health.
It stops the vector from entering the amplification zone. That's brilliant. And below blue, we have green.
Green indicates a moderate illness. You are sick and you do need professional medical attention, but it is not a life-threatening emergency.
So you don't need to rush to the ER.
No. The guidance is to schedule an appointment with a doctor or speak to a triage nurse within a 24 to 48-hour window. It removes the panic of needing an ambulance right this second.
And finally, we arrive at the most empowering code in the system, yellow.
Yellow indicates a minor, self-limiting illness. A standard viral cold, a mild tension headache, a brief upset stomach.
And the guidance for a yellow code.
It's revolutionary in its simplicity. Self-manage, use basic home remedies, consult a local pharmacist if needed, but above all, trust your body's inherent inner wisdom to heal itself.
So you don't need a doctor.
You do not need a doctor, and you absolutely do not need antibiotics.
It is incredible. Dr. Maya is the ultimate translator between our terrified ego and our physical biology. We are screaming, "I am in pain, I must be dying." And the AI calmly steps in as the master observer from the quantum texts.
Exactly.
It says, "I observe a yellow pattern. You are not dying. You are safe. Rest and drink fluids."
And in that exact fraction of a second, the AI halts the quantum collapse of a negative reality right in its tracks.
Wow.
By giving the patient that yellow code, it instantly collapses their imagined fear of a catastrophic disease into a manageable, minor reality. It teaches the patient, in real time, how to distinguish between true medical danger and imagined psychological anxiety.
It completely short-circuits the frantic pursuit of external validation. Because the AI gave you an objective yellow, you don't panic, you don't rush to the emergency room.
You don't demand an antibiotic prescription for a viral cold.
And crucially, You don't expose yourself to the 83% superbug colonization rate lurking in the hospital waiting room.
It restores narrative, pattern, and logical proportion to the center of healthcare. It actively empowers people to realize that their own inner wisdom, their rest, and their natural remedies are very often the correct medical answer.
Which shifts everything.
By doing this on a mass scale, the technology is fundamentally shifting the observer effect for humanity. It's training us to look at our health with clarity, resilience, and confidence instead of blind terror.
It's a brilliant technological filter, but I have a massive logistical problem with this.
What's that?
Having an incredibly smart AI software program on your smartphone is fantastic if you happen to own the latest iPhone, if you have a blazing fast 5G data connection, and if you speak fluent English.
Right, the privilege barrier.
Exactly. That is entirely insufficient to change reality for the entire globe. What about the population suffering the most? What about the illiterate? The rural farmers in developing nations? The immigrant workers living in urban slums who face massive language barriers?
Software alone can't fix that.
Right. Software alone cannot decentralize power if the most vulnerable people cannot access it.
That is the exact problem Dr. Srivatsa recognized. He knew that an app on a smartphone was an inherently elitist solution.
It had to be more than that.
The software needed a durable physical anchor in the real world to truly democratize access and decentralize healthcare power.
Which brings us to the physical deployment, the Prima kiosk. This is where we move from software into hard infrastructure designed to reclaim free will for everyone, everywhere.
PRIMA is an acronym that stands for Personal Resourceful Empowering Medical Advice. It is the physical, community-level deployment vehicle for the Dr. Maya intelligence.
I love how the business plans describe it.
Yeah, as a modern successor to the public telephone booth. A familiar, trusted, and highly accessible piece of street furniture. Some documents even refer to it as a healthcare ATM.
Let's talk about the hardware engineering of these kiosks, because it is brilliantly designed for the harsh realities of the physical world, not just the pristine environment of a Silicon Valley boardroom.
It's rugged.
How do these things actually function in a rural village with, no infrastructure?
First and foremost, they are designed as standalone, resilient units.
Yeah.
They do not even need to be plugged into the electrical grid.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they can be entirely solar-powered, equipped with battery backups. They do not rely on fragile, high-speed cellular networks either. They possess offline fallbacks, meaning the core triage algorithms can function even if the internet goes completely down.
That's amazing. Physically, what does a user see when they walk up to one?
You're looking at a highly durable, weather-resistant steel enclosure. Crucially, the exterior and the interface are treated with a specialized antimicrobial coating.
Stop the spread right there.
Exactly. It features a large, 21-inch high-definition touchscreen display. It has a built-in HD camera designed specifically for examining physical symptoms like skin rashes, lacerations, or eye infections.
So it can actually see you.
Yes. It also includes a thermal printer to provide the user with a physical paper copy of their triage report. It has a QR code scanner to instantly read digital medical records or ID cards.
And what about privacy? If it's on a street corner, you don't want everyone hearing your medical issues.
For privacy, it utilizes directional audio speakers and provides disposable or easily sanitized privacy headphones.
And the software interface itself is entirely revolutionary because it completely bypasses the need for literacy. You don't need to know how to read or type to use this advanced AI.
Exactly. The system utilizes advanced natural language processing and multilingual voice guidance in over 30 different languages and regional dialects.
30 languages?
Over 30. Think about the impact of that. An 85-year-old grandmother in a remote village who has never touched a smartphone or a computer in her life can walk up to this kiosk.
And just talk to it.
She can speak naturally in her native tongue, and the kiosk will listen, translate, analyze the symptom triad through the Dr. Maya filter, and speak back to her, providing immediate world-class triage guidance in a language she actually understands.
This directly solves the access inequality highlighted in the dossier. The text mentions a Bengali mother living in East London who might delay seeking vital care for her child simply because she's terrified she won't be able to explain the symptoms accurately in English.
Right. The language barrier is deadly.
Or a farmer in rural Bihar who ignores the early warning signs of a severe cardiovascular event because the nearest human doctor is a 3-hour bus ride away, and he can't afford to lose a day's wages just to ask a question. Prima obliterates those barriers.
And beyond solving access, the kiosk acts as the physical manifestation of that biological firewall we discussed earlier. Let's walk through the mechanics of the blue code in the real world.
Okay, let's play this out. Imagine a highly contagious patient, someone carrying a virulent, drug-resistant respiratory infection.
Under the old system, they'd walk into a crowded pharmacy or a clinic waiting room and infect a dozen people.
But under the new system,
They walk up to a Prima kiosk located outside the pharmacy or the clinic. They speak their symptoms. Dr. Maya instantly detects the highly suspect infectious pattern and issues the blue code alert.
so the kiosk literally tells them to stop.
The kiosk verbally instructs the patient in their own language to immediately return home and isolate. It automatically prints a detailed triage report for them to take home, and it digitally facilitates a secure telehealth call with a doctor.
It stops the superbug at the perimeter. It keeps the fire out of the hospital entirely.
Yes, it sanitizes itself using the antimicrobial surfaces and internal UV light systems, and the next user is totally safe.
That's incredible. And the kiosk design also addresses another massive, often ignored driver of silent suffering: societal shame.
The anonymous triage feature. This is brilliant.
It's a critical function, right?
It really is. Many highly contagious and resistant infections, such as tuberculosis or sexually transmitted infections, carry an immense, crushing social stigma in many communities.
People are absolutely terrified of the moral judgment of their neighbors or their local doctor.
The fear of being judged is often stronger than the fear of the disease itself. So, they hide, they refuse to seek treatment, they suffer in silence, and all the while, they are silently spreading the pathogen throughout the community.
But the Prima kiosk offers a solution to that. It features a free 5-minute anonymous triage mode.
Yes. A user can walk up to the machine, secure life-saving medical advice, and receive guidance on where to get discreet testing, all without ever providing their name or their identity.
It completely removes the psychological barrier of shame from the diagnostic equation.
It does.
If we pull back and analyze the sheer scale of the systemic revolution happening here, the Prima kiosk represents a tectonic shift in global power dynamics.
It fundamentally decentralizes the control of health.
It takes the power to interpret biology out of the hands of centralized, highly expensive, bureaucratic, and often intimidating hospital systems, and it anchors that power directly onto the street corner.
It puts it into the local pharmacy, the community center, the rural village square.
It allows the individual to finally step back into their sovereign power by providing clear, objective, color-coded reality checks. The kiosk eliminates the paralyzing fear that drives people into catastrophic medical debt and systemic enslavement. But I have to stop you again because this raises a very serious philosophical and ethical question for me.
Okay, let's hear it.
If we are replacing the human doctor's initial assessment with an artificial intelligence, aren't we just swapping one master for another?
That's a valid concern.
Aren't we just surrendering our free will to a machine instead of a human bureaucracy? How is Dr. Maya any different from the massive tech giants in Silicon Valley who just want to hoover up our intimate health data and feed it into profit-driven algorithms designed to sell us things?
That is a highly critical distinction to make. And the press releases and foundational documents in the dossier hit this issue head-on. The fundamental difference lies entirely in who controls the intelligence and what its core objective is.
Okay, so who controls it?
Corporations do not control Dr. Maya's clinical algorithms. Doctors do.
Explain how that works in practice.
Dr. Maya was trained directly by Dr. Srivatsa, utilizing his half-century of on-the-ground clinical experience. The thresholds for what triggers a red, blue, green, or yellow alert are not static.
They can change.
They are dynamic, and they are controlled by medical professionals. When a new infectious disease emerges globally, or when local antibiotic resistance patterns shift in a specific community, it is the doctors who update the screening criteria in the AI.
So the doctors set the boundaries based purely on clinical judgment and community safety, completely independent of corporate profit margins or insurance billing codes.
Exactly. There is a direct quote from Dr. Srivatsa in the materials that perfectly encapsulates this philosophy. He states, Silicon Valley wants to replace doctors with artificial intelligence. I am giving doctors artificial intelligence to enhance their practice and reclaim their time.
Wow, that's a powerful distinction.
Dr. Maya is not designed to replace the human touch or the compassion of a physician. It is designed to handle the routine, algorithmic screening and to filter out the mass panic.
By filtering out the panic, it frees up the human doctors to actually spend meaningful, unhurried time with the patients who have complex red coat emergencies, the ones that require true human compassion and surgical intervention.
Exactly. It extends the logical, clinical thinking of a doctor into thousands of remote places where a physical doctor cannot possibly be.
And by decentralizing this intelligence, the impact of the technology ripples incredibly far beyond just physical biology.
Oh, absolutely.
It extends into curing the systemic societal ailments of poverty, financial ruin, and economic despair. Which brings us to the final and perhaps most empowering aspect of this entire system, eradicating poverty and empowering communities.
Because the Prima kiosk is not just a piece of medical hardware. The business plan outlines it as a highly scalable micro-franchise economic model.
An engine for economic empowerment.
Yes, at the grassroots level. Let's look at the mechanics of how this prevents financial ruin on an individual micro level. The dossier provides stark, real-world data on this.
Give us an example.
Consider a patient who begins experiencing persistent, agonizing lower abdominal pain. Under the old fear-driven model, this person panics. They wait until the pain is absolutely unbearable, and then they rush in terror to a massive, private equity-owned corporate hospital in the city.
Because they're terrified, they just submit to whatever the system says.
Right. The hospital, driven by profit and liability, subjects them to a battery of expensive, unnecessary scans, blood tests, and overnight stays.
And what's the result?
Ultimately, the patient ends up undergoing a surgical intervention that might have been entirely avoidable, racking up a bill of 3.5 lakh rupees.
3.5 lakh rupees. That represents complete generational financial devastation for an average family in many parts of the world.
It does. It means selling land, pulling children out of school, and entering a cycle of inescapable debt.
But let's run that exact same biological scenario with the Prima network deployed in their community.
Okay, that same patient, feeling the onset of abdominal pain on day one, walks up to the kiosk in their village. Dr. Maya listens to the symptoms, strips away the rising anxiety, and identifies a clear yellow code pattern.
The AI sees the truth of it.
The AI determines it's likely a minor gastrointestinal issue or a simple urinary tract infection that does not require surgical intervention. The kiosk advises a simple, inexpensive course of action.
But like just hydration and a specific over-the-counter remedy available at the local pharmacy.
Exactly. The patient spends 300 rupees instead of 3.5 lakh rupees.
That's a massive difference.
Because the objective AI intervened early and filtered out the fear, it literally saved that family from bankruptcy and systemic enslavement.
And the economic model empowers the community as a whole, not just the patients. The business framework outlines how local non-governmental organizations, ambitious teenagers, orphans, and women's self-help groups can actually own and operate these kiosks.
Yes, they are trained and certified as Maya advocates.
This is a brilliant, self-sustaining socioeconomic loop. But how do they actually make money running a kiosk?
Through microtransactions. Users might pay a tiny, highly affordable fee for the triage service, or the kiosk might be subsidized by local governments or public health advertising.
And the advocate gets a cut.
The local Maya advocate keeps a percentage of that revenue, as well as connection fees generated if the kiosk facilitates a paid telehealth call with a remote doctor.
These local advocates learn highly valuable digital literacy skills, they master the operation of the AI, and they earn a steady, reliable income.
They're able to sustain their charities, their families, and their local economies with absolute dignity, rather than relying on external dependency or handouts.
They become the respected health guardians of their own communities.
I really do. And if we zoom out from the village level to the massive macroeconomic scale, the projections are absolutely staggering. Look at the data provided regarding the United Kingdom's National Health Service, the NHS.
Right, the NHS is currently buckling under a catastrophic crisis.
It is. There are over 7.5 million people languishing on waiting lists. They process 372 million appointments a year, and the system is facing a massive £6.4 billion deficit.
The system is just collapsing under the weight of fear and inefficiency. But the proposal in the dossier states that a national deployment of just 5,000 Prima kiosks across the UK could intercept and filter out up to 40% of avoidable general practitioner visits.
40%. We're talking about intercepting the panic before it clogs the system.
Yeah.
That represents a conservative $1 billion opportunity in savings for the NHS. It saves millions of hours of wasted clinical time.
And the data for India is equally massive. The projections show that by the year 2030, a nationwide network of 100,000 Prima kiosks deployed across rural areas could generate 2,000 crore in income for those rural entrepreneurs and Maya advocates.
While simultaneously on the biological front, that network is projected to prevent 10 million unnecessary antibiotic courses from being prescribed, saving an estimated 50,000 lives from AMR complications in that region alone.
It is a dual engine of economic prosperity and biological preservation.
It absolutely is.
So to bring this entire deeply complex journey full circle back to the quantum physics we discussed at the very beginning, by utilizing the Prima network, by taking this objective, fearless intelligence and placing it directly into the hands of the people on the street, we aren't just deploying medical hardware.
No, we're doing much more than that.
We are fundamentally changing the collective observation of humanity.
We absolutely are. We are altering the frequency of our focus. We stop observing humanity as a fragile, terrified mass of victims, helplessly waiting in endless, contaminated hospital queues, begging for expensive chemical drugs that no longer even work.
We cease feeding our collective life force into the nightmare wave of antimicrobial resistance and systemic enslavement.
Instead, we actively start observing a completely different reality. We observe a reality where communities are entirely self-sustaining and incredibly resilient.
Where the paralyzing fear of illness and failure is replaced by calm, actionable, objective knowledge.
Where the individual is completely empowered to make informed decisions about their own body. Where they finally trust their own inner wisdom over the demands of an external institution.
By fundamentally changing the lens through which we view our physical symptoms, shifting from a lens of chaotic panic to a lens of objective, color-coded clarity, we are literally collapsing a new, elevated version of reality into physical form.
We're manifesting a world where true free will is restored to every individual.
It is like we are finally pulling the plug on a tragic, multi-generational reality television show where everyone on Earth is forced to play the role of a sick, terrified, indebted victim. We finally found the remote control, and we're changing the channel to a network where every single person is the master architect of their own physical and economic well-being.
We are shifting the massive tectonic plates of society from a paradigm of doctor-centered control to a paradigm of patient-centered empowerment. We are turning off the fear, and in doing so, we are physically healing the future of the human race.
This has been a truly immense and mind-bending deep dive. Let's take a breath and just summarize the incredible ground we've covered today.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
We started deep in the abstract mechanics of quantum physics and the observer effect, learning how our collective unchecked fear of illness actually collapses into physical suffering. We looked at the terrifying, tangible mechanism of how that psychological fear drives us to demand antibiotics, which in turn has manifested the catastrophic reality of antimicrobial resistance and mutating superbugs.
The post-antibiotic era.
Right. We examine the fatal flaws of a broken, doctor-centric healthcare system that feeds on our dependency and amplifies our sickness.
And then we explored the historical and technological antidote.
We did. We traced the profound wisdom of Acharya Charaka's holistic listening and Florence Nightingale's systemic observation straight through to Dr. Katyali Srivatsa's brilliant modern creations, the Dr. Maya artificial intelligence, and the Prima kiosk network.
We saw exactly how this technology provides the precise, objective filter humanity desperately needs.
To bypass panic, observe our health accurately, trust our inner wisdom over unnecessary drugs, and definitively reclaim our free will from corporate and medical institutions.
It has been an absolute journey, and as always, we do not want you to just listen and forget. We want to leave you, the listener, with something highly practical and deeply provocative to carry with you into your daily life.
Precisely. So I want you to consider this scenario. The very next time you feel a physical symptom in your own body, like a sudden sharp headache, a lingering cough, or an unexpected pain in your stomach,
I want you to pause and pay incredibly close attention your immediate internal psychological reaction.
do you instantly observe that symptom through the dark, chaotic lens of catastrophic fear, ready to surrender your autonomy to the nearest medical system and demand a pill?
Or will you choose, in that exact fraction of a second, to step into your power as the master observer?
Will you take a deep breath, trust your inner wisdom, seek objective clarity, and allow the truth of your body's profound resilience to collapse into reality? Your own health, and quite literally the future of humanity's biological health, depends entirely on where you choose to focus your attention.